we truly are, because no matter what comes, we're going to find a way to make sure that we navigate. And if we do it as community, if we do it in partnership, authentic partnership with our institutions, if we do it with a government that actually sees us, hears us, and respects us, then we have an opportunity to actually make transformational change happen. For those of you who've ever followed any of the things that I've shared in front of folks, I talk about moving from surviving to thriving. Survival was intentional in this country for many black and brown and indigenous folks, lower wealth white folks, even in some immigrant communities. There was intentionality in otherizing some folks and making sure the resources stayed in certain places. And we will talk about that. I bring that forward not to anchor us in that, but to actually honor how we got to the moments that we find ourselves in. Because I think it even highlights in a greater form and fashion how we have overcome in many instances. So we will talk about communities who are making transformation happen. And I think that's important because whether we are here in Washington, D.C., or we're in South Carolina or North Carolina, or we're on the West Coast, or we're in the Rust Belt, it's important to know that one, we're not in it by ourselves. Two, that people have been able to make change happen. And what does that actually look like? I am terrible with technology. I just want to let y'all know that before we get started. So do I point in this direction right here? Let's see. Here we go. All right. I don't do nothing else right. Y'all should clap. So Gandhi once said, I think it's important. You heard I'm a writer and a poet and a number of other things. But I think, when we have quotes, sometimes it helps to put things in perspective, right? So Gandhi once said, the earth provides enough for every man and woman's needs, but not enough for their greeds. I want you to think about that when you see the dynamics that are playing on all across our country and here sometimes in the district, that when we really take a step back, we listen to elders, we listen to others who have been able to navigate, who've been able to build. We have what we need, but sometimes some folks just want to hoard it all for themselves. Does that make sense to everyone? So I think that quote is really important. I love writers. Audre Lorde is one of my favorite writers. James Baldwin is another one. We'll talk about some of the others as we weave this together. But Audre Lorde talked about intersectionality before it really became vogue to be able to talk about that. But it's really just our communities. Our communities are not monolithic. Our communities don't have just one issue or one set of opportunities. There are multiple ones, and that's why the work is so important that we have all kinds of different organizations, all kinds of individuals with so many gifts and blessings and treasures. I often talk about the treasures that exist inside of our communities. And whether we're talking about local governments or county governments, state governments or federal governments, it takes all of them coming together. You all have had conversations earlier about housing issues and jobs issues. We're talking about the environment and a number of other things. All of these things come together. And when we do it properly, through intersectionality, we can actually make sure we don't leave gaps. I'm not one of the folks who will come and stand in front of you and sugarcoat stuff. I believe in facts, and I believe in actually making sure that we are talking about history the way history happened, so that we can make sure that we don't repeat it, but also that we can learn from it. So here in Washington, D.C., I thought it was important. I spend a lot of time, Dennis probably knows, I love being down by the Anacostia River. I'm in Anacostia Park. Anytime I get off an airplane, that's the place that I go to be able to de-stress and to think creatively about where I was and what just transpired. So I thought that I would start with making sure that we're honest about our indigenous brothers and sisters and how erasure that's happening in this moment has been a part of the process from the beginning in this country. So these are Piscataway people, Anacostans, who were actually the folks who are originally from here. So we want to make sure not only that we're honoring that, but that we understand whose land we're on, where we are, and who we have to make sure that is a part of the process of healing. And then, of course, all of our brothers and sisters, our ancestors who were brought here for free labor. So when we talk about worker justice issues, we are also talking about, from the beginning, these policies. And let me slow down. Because when you see erasure of indigenous people, when you see erasure and manipulation of black folks, it was policy that said that was okay. So policy can uplift, or policy can actually be deconstructive. So I wanted to bring that quickly into our conversation. And I'm going to move kind of fast, so we can slow down. But policy also was about these various bans that have gone on. The Chinese Exclusion Act, when we talk about infrastructure, you hear, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican, they're talking about infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. We gotta understand that, you know, along with black folks, Chinese folks helped to build the railroads, they helped to build the interstate highway system that goes on the railroad side of the equation, but we also had the Japanese internment camps. All these things were part of policy, and I just wanted to bring that in as we have this conversation, because the next part, many folks ended up in certain parts of the city because of redlining and restrictive covenants. And most folks understand that. You literally push people in, you devalue their homes. You allow them to only be in certain locations, and then instead of building up infrastructure, you don't make the investments in that. And that's why that's important in our conversation, because even though there are laws against it now, it still happens in certain locations in different types of ways. Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That goes back to a lot of the lessons it's about you being people coming together. We can do some amazing things. And how do we know that it works? We know that it works because if we're going to have an honest conversation, even though we still have a long way to go, women had to fight literally to be able to have some basic rights, if you will. And we saw right there in DC, the marches that used to happen long before any of us in this room were around. But it plays a role in individuals getting engaged in the process. We've seen the exact same thing happen in relationship to civil rights, all the way through Jim Crow and a number of other types of things, of men and women and children coming together and saying we are going to be the ones that actually help to make change happen. And again, it is pushing back against policies that are not helpful and making sure that we're moving in a direction that is. And then, if we're talking about the environmental movement, all the amazing young people who are part of that. So when you look at the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and RCRA and all these various acts that are out there, it was young people and folks of color who were the ones who are actually pushing them. And I want to bring into our conversation, if you look here on the far right-hand side of the screen, those children who are laying down, that's in Warren County, North Carolina. How many folks ever been to North Carolina? How many folks been to Warren County, North Carolina? One person, 1.5. Somebody wasn't sure, she just drove by. That's all right. She said, I wasn't trying to stop. This is an important conversation. This is a flashpoint for the environmental justice movement. So we can't have a conversation about climate if we're not talking about environmental injustices, which are a part of the drivers of what's going on in relationship to the climate crisis. I bring this into our conversation also because people were protesting and protesting and protesting, and there was a young representative by that time. His name was Walter Fauntleroy. How many folks in the room know Walter Fauntleroy? I want to see if any of the young people raise their hand. Sometimes people take your phone out in Google. It's fine. I don't mind you taking your phone out. You should check the person who's standing in front of you to make sure that what they're sharing with you is actually true. Because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. I'm not saying would happen here, but we have a lot of people who stand in front of us and you're like, I don't even know if you know what you're talking about. Walter Fauntleroy was invited down. Folks said, Walter, if you come down, you're a representative. Said there won't be no trouble, nothing bad will happen. Walter said, yeah, I'll come on down. Walter came down, people were protesting, and everybody got arrested. The difference was when Walter came back to Washington, D.C., because he was a representative, he was able to help to commission some of the first studies that were out there, and that began that journey around environmental justice. And Mr. Chestnut will let you know if I say something that's not true. The other part of when we're talking about climate issues, we're talking about environmental justice issues and a number of others, we need to also make sure that we are honoring the true leaders in that space. It is a matriarchal movement. You will see a few men who are a part of it, but I always give flowers to the women who actually are the drivers in that space. Just like the civil rights movement, even though we know who got a lot of the credit for that, I think it's important that we bring forward those voices. I also think that it's incredibly important that you also make sure that you give flowers to the home team, to the individuals who have actually been out there doing the work for a long time. And that's why I didn't know he was going to be here in the room today. But that's why we all should give a round of applause to Mr. Dennis Chestnut for all the work that he's done. And Brenda Richardson, and a whole bunch of other folks that we could sit here and have deep conversations about everything that they have poured back into our communities. But I don't believe in going into spaces and not making sure that we are making sure that the narrative is clear. And we find these situations going on both in the district and across the country where many of our young people are being exposed. Many women who are pregnant are being exposed to toxic chemicals. And why is that important in relationship to the climate conversation? Because, again, we get these double and triple whammy impacts in our communities. There's the intersectionality that's going on. There are these on-ramps into the sets of situations that we're dealing with. And this picture always just resonated with me for years. James Baldwin once said that if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. How many times have folks tried to pretend that the impacts that are going on in Ward 7 and Ward 8 aren't happening or aren't happening to the level that they are? How many times also do people often not want to speak to the beauty that exists inside of our community? We saw that just not that long ago when people were creating narratives. We're like, well, wait a minute, yeah, we got some challenges over here, but we got all these other great things that are going on. I'm not going to get into a political conversation, but I am just going to say that we have to set the record straight on many of these types of things. And because of the way that our conversation is framed out today, we have to often get ahead of the curve, if that makes sense to everyone. Instead of waiting until something happens, let's make sure that people understand the beauty that is in our communities. A part of that is being real about what's actually going on. Now, in our country right now, we have over 350,000 people who are dying prematurely from the burning of fossil fuels. By a show of hands, how many folks knew that? So we got a couple folks. So we have more people who are dying from the burning of fossil fuels than are dying from gun violence. And how important is us working on that issue, right? It's incredibly important. More people are dying from the burning of fossil fuels, that air pollution, than are dying from car crashes. And more people are dying from that than the overdoses of drugs. So that's how real this is. But in many instances, the resources and the focus that's necessary for us to address that sometimes isn't at the level that's necessary. Does that make sense to everyone? By a show of hands, how many folks in the room have taken a breath of air in the last 5 minutes? Raise your hand. Find the air breathers. I see some non-air breathers. Non-air breathers. I mean, it's important, right? Because in certain communities, when people take in that breath of air, right, it's an autonomic response. We do it naturally. Some folks are breathing in something that's healthy for their body. And in other areas, if you're close to some of our transportation routes, or you're next to a facility, or a number of other types of things that can put toxic air into your body, then people are breathing in something that is not helpful. And it's important for us to understand these dynamics. Why are people getting liver and kidney diseases? Why are people having accelerated rates of cancers and a number of other things? And often it is because of what you were being exposed to. And that's why, and I'm going to keep calling his name out because he's in the room and I love him, the work that Mr. Chestnut and others have been doing is so incredibly important on the conservation side of the equation as well. Now I want to just go a little bit deeper into this, because how many folks in the room know somebody who has asthma? Just raise your hand, either hand. Looks like everybody in the room knows somebody who has asthma. We've got about 25 million folks, that's a conservative number, who have asthma. Folks are working diligently, of course, on it. We've got, I believe, 7 million kids who have asthma. Know that every day in our country, we have about 11 people who die from asthma. Every day. But we also know in places like Ward 7 and Ward 8, and I know there are experts who are here in the room, they're the most challenged areas in the city, and we also know emergency room visits are a part of that. So when it comes to this particular issue, which is tied, of course, to pollution, which is tied to the climate crisis, we've got to make sure that we're addressing these issues in a holistic fashion. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody do me a favor. Everybody take a deep breath in. Hold it for a second. And let it out. That's the importance. We have to make sure that when folks do that, no matter where they are, that they have the ability to breathe in clean air. And this is just a map that's showing where some of the greatest challenges are, so the darker colors, of course. Almost every map that we overlay for any of the issues that we're talking about, Ward 7 and 8 often are the ones that are most disproportionately impacted. I want to talk about this a little bit also because everybody says that they, and I hope that it's true, that everybody loves children, loves babies. There's some real significant impacts that are going on. I don't know if the first speaker actually went into this in relationship to the mental health related sets of impacts that are going on. But now some of these very small particles are actually making it through the mother's bloodstream into the babies, sometimes into the brains, into other organs. So once again, we have many maternal health related challenges, Black maternal health challenges, Latino or Latinx maternal health challenges. For Indigenous brothers and sisters in certain parts of the country, a very similar dynamic. So we can't play with air pollution. Now, I grew up in a couple of different places. I grew up in Appalachia a little bit, and then I also grew up in Detroit. I always bring my other home team in, the 48217, because when kids look out the window there, instead of seeing green space, what they end up seeing are the various factories that are there. And they also are dealing with very similar dynamics and very similar issues in relation to breathing difficulties. And I did a lot of work on the Texas coast and Louisiana. I bring this in because I think about kids when they're outside playing. I think about young athletes and some of the exposures they're doing. This here is down in the Ship Channel in Texas, in Houston. There's a gentleman by the name of Juan Parras and his family, which has an organization called Tejas. And this is their community. What you don't see, and I have some other pictures, is that when they go outside on their front porches or their back porches, and everybody do me a favor, just reach one of your arms out as far as you can reach it. So in their community, when they're in their back porch yards, they literally can touch the fencing in these plants. And that's the dynamic that's going on. I know we don't have the exact same dynamic here in DC, but all of us who've been doing this work know of the various facilities in the sets of exposures that have been a part of that. But I bring those in because everybody is dealing with this, and these are the types of chemicals that many people are breathing in, whether it's vinyl chloride or mercury or hydrogen cyanide or benzene or a number of these others. Many of them are cancer-causing chemicals. When we had the East Palestine train derailment, many folks remember that a couple years ago. These folks and other folks in places like Cancer Alley, Louisiana, have been dealing with exposures to these chemicals for decades upon decades upon decades, right? And you know, the brothers and sisters in East Palestine, they deserve people to be addressing those issues. That was a much shorter amount of time, and they were lucky to be able to, not lucky, they deserve to be able to get reprieve from the things they are going on, but I want to keep it in perspective that you've got communities that have been waiting for 20 or 30 years for support, and you've got another set of communities. We should need to make sure that everybody gets the support they need quickly. Does that make sense, everybody? All right. Let's keep going. I want to bring the water quality issues in as well, because when we talk about the climate crisis, and we're going to eventually get to a point where we understand our infrastructure needs, the challenges around infrastructure, and how these huge rain events are going to make it even more challenging. We've got to also talk about, everybody remembers what happened in Flint. I know we got some younger people in the room who may not, and in Jackson. So everybody understands the impacts of lead, right? Neurological, developmental issues that are going on. Why kids can't learn sometimes or have more difficulty in learning, and why we need to focus on that. Here in the district, of course, we've got our own sets of challenges that are still there. I want to applaud the folks that have already been helping to move the needle forward. I think last year, when the experts in the room, you can help correct me, I think we had about 44,000 lead pipes in homes that still needed work. Now we're down to about 34,000 and some odd number, but we still got a huge amount of work to do. And the dollars, many of the dollars have been dedicated, but we've got an administration right now that doesn't see as much value in that space. If you're thinking about housing, if the house doesn't have lead, whether it's lead paint or lead pipes, it's probably going to hold more value than if one does, but luckily the district has some programs to be able to move forward. I'm sure some folks have talked to you a little bit about that, but it's a part of what we have to do. CSOs, SSOs, these stormwater, that carry the water. We just got to make sure that we continue to stay focused there. For those of us who have worked on rivers and other water bodies, you have these huge rain events, stuff gets pushed through because the systems, sometimes over 100 years old, just can't deal with all those stressors that are there. I encourage you, you can't see the full name, Catherine Coleman Flowers wrote an amazing book, and she put a spotlight on all these black communities and brown communities that are literally have people walking in human waste because of the sets of inadequate infrastructure in place. And here in the district also, when we have these big events, we know the challenges that live in those situations. This is just real quickly showing you what a healthy system looks like and one that's being overwhelmed. And we've just got to continue to push forward. And we've also got to make sure that we're working with folks in Maryland and in other locations that are also pushing things down into our river systems and our other water bodies. And for all of the challenges that are there, there are also all these amazing folks that are out there doing the work, helping to make sure that they're catching the various things with these trash traps, and helping to make sure that we're rebuilding our water bodies and making sure that we have the natural infrastructure that's necessary. Food deserts is another issue that's tied to the climate crisis and environmental injustice. We know we've got situations, especially here in Ward 7, where instead of having the supermarkets that we need and other places for healthy food, that often we are in a more challenged situation. But some folks are working on those types of things, of course. And you've got these amazing folks who are out there actually helping to bring communities alive again with healthy food. So whether we're talking about the Nicholson Project or the Urban Farm Food Hub or a number of others who are actually getting in the ground, getting their hands back to Mother Earth and making change happen. My grandfather was a coal miner and a farmer. So as a young boy, I was working on the farm 5 a.m. till I had to go to school, and you come back home and you do some stuff. So I really appreciate when we get back to the earth and being able to understand that if we can make sure that the land is clean enough, right? And that's why you have some of these raised beds, that we have an opportunity to feed our communities and to change some dynamics. I had to bring this in. Sometimes people will be like, well, Mustafa, why are you talking about this? Because we're going to talk about the climate crisis. We're going to talk about the impacts that are happening in many black and brown, indigenous, and other communities. We got to also talk about where some of the problems are coming from. So we've got about the number varies, between 2.4 and 2.6 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline in our country. Does anybody know how far you can go with 2.4 million miles of pipeline? How many times do you think you can go to the moon? That's scary, just being able to ask the question.
Right? 250,000 miles one way.
That's right. It's 200, well, depending on where we are in rotation, 240 or 250,000 miles to the moon, right? So 2.4 or 2.6 million miles, you can start to add up how many times that takes you back and forth to the moon. So that's how much product is going as well. So I bring that into our conversation because sometimes you'll have politicians who'll say, well, we need to drill, baby, drill. Anybody ever heard that before? Right?
This year.
Right, well, okay. So it's interesting that you would say that when we already have this huge amount of infrastructure and product that's moving through. And that product, and I'm not saying that there haven't been uses, because in the past, as we evolve, we move to newer things. But now we're at a point in time where the old energy sources are not as needed, and we have to be able to transition to cleaner forms of energy to be able to deal with some of these impacts that we saw. Now I'll make sure y'all get these slides if you need them in your conversations. I also believe that the arts have an important role to play in education and connection as we move forward. I was blessed, Beyonce was there after some of the hurricanes, and not just writing the check, but actually getting down on the ground with people. There are a number of other artists locally here and across the country. So as you are doing your advocacy work, or you are a local government or whatever, we should be looking to partner with the artists that are in our community to be able to share, because they'll be able to reach folks that if you stand in front of them, I often say I can put 100 of the best scientists in front of a room, and you may remember 10% of what they say, but if I put Beyonce or Rihanna in front of the room, how many of y'all gonna pay attention, right? How many of y'all gonna take some pictures? So that's why I think artistry is so incredibly important. Marvin, who spent time here, Marvin Gaye, one of his most iconic songs really speaks to what we're going through in this moment. We see when we're out of balance what happens. These hurricanes that are now stronger and more intense and causing more damage. Floods, instead of having 50-year floods, we now have 100-year floods, 500-year floods that cause more damage. Then of course, if you don't have the ability to have the insurance that's necessary, it's almost like starting over at best. And I bring this into our conversation because many of you probably know some of the locations here in Ward 7 that there's some real challenges that are going on. But there is a connection with folks of color across the country and with what's going on right here at home. I bring this into our conversation because there are a number of dynamics that are playing out, of course, right now. So many brothers and sisters, early on in my career, I did a lot of work with farm workers, and the dynamics, one, there was all these water quality issues where farm workers didn't have what they needed around all kinds of different issues, drinking water, sanitation, a number of different types of things. Folks are now also in the fields having to breathe in the pollution that's coming from these wildfires. And as they are breathing in those toxic emissions that come from wildfires, because when wildfires happen, I should have shared with you all, I've worked both natural and man-made disasters since Katrina all the way up until I resigned when President Trump came in. And so often we'll see wildfires happening in Canada or on the West Coast and think, well, I'm sorry it's happening, but how does that have anything to do with me? Once those wildfires, if they're intense enough, it gets up into our airstream, it moves across the country. So even if you have any type of breathing difficulties here in Washington, D.C., those particles can make it to your lungs. So we should always care about what's happening, whether it's on the other side of the country, sometimes on the other side of the planet. I'm gonna go a little bit faster. Extreme heat, anybody been hot? I see some people hot right there.
It's reading.
So, I don't want to get too deep into the science on this. I'll just say organizations like the IPCC and the National Climate Assessment have been sharing with us for decades that the temperatures were going to continue to increase. We now know by the time we get to the end of this century, we'll probably have 3 months of over 95 plus degree weather, and that's the conservative estimate. We've got to make sure we have the infrastructure in place, for elders and others who are going to have to be able to navigate this. And we can go into a deeper conversation about this when we go into the Q&A. And then, of course, we also understand you've got to have government that is using tax dollars in a way that actually can help. I know here in DC, we have the EJ Act of 2023 on Capitol Hill. We've been trying to get the EJ for All Act passed for a number of years now. The last administration actually began to build climate and environmental justice into a number of opportunities. If this conversation was 6-7 months ago, we would be talking about all those different types of resources that were there and how to actually get at them. But I think we have the conversation in a different way today. There's still some tools that are out there for you to be able to understand what's transpiring in your community. Just type in your zip code, your lat long, and be able to pull up and see whether it's pollution, investments, a number of other types of things. I'll make sure you all get links to all the various tools that are out there. There's some new tools that were developed on the state level. I'll share those with you as well. And we're gonna keep rolling. Now, I think it's important to also talk about all these amazing folks who are actually not just navigating, but are building businesses in this space. How many of y'all have had somebody walk up to you in your neighborhood or on the street talk to you about solar? Right? I can't get out of my car without somebody rolling up on me talking about, you interested in solar? And I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in it. Let's talk about it. These are two young folks of color who have created their own companies. There are a number of them that are out there, and not just in the solar space, but I always want to bring them forward. So Gilbert's one, Crystal's the other one, who saw this opportunity and have built. And it's incredibly important because when you utilize renewable forms of energy, of course, we don't get those same impacts that we do on the fossil fuel side. That's one part. I also heard the conversation earlier about the wealth disparities that exist inside of our communities and the wealth gap. So when we create our own businesses, which all of our parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles always talk to us about being entrepreneurs, it helps to change dynamics. So that's why I like bringing forward all these just truly amazing individuals. And there are different opportunities that are out there. Sometimes if people are just looking at what's going on the rooftops. There are all kinds of different ways of getting at it, and there are these businesses that are being started across the country. Real talk, it's going to be more difficult now because the administration doesn't seem the same value, but there are venture capitalists, there are foundations that are still investing in this space. And here are some folks that you may or may not know. So I'll bring Brianna into our conversation. Mackenzie Scott has been just amazing in her philanthropy as well. We've got some of the folks over at Kresge, EGA folks, Bezos, okay. So there are individuals on the philanthropic side who are still making investments. 2 days ago, there were 100 philanthropic organizations that got together and sent a letter to the current administration talking about why they are still going to be making investments and that this administration should be focused in a similar direction. So when the federal government is not doing what it should because it is using your tax dollars, there are others who are trying to fill the space. Real talk, they'll never be able to fill it in the way that the federal government would be able to. But I also remind folks that this is a moment in time, and that this moment too will pass if we get engaged and make sure that we're helping to make sure that there are people who are in office who care about your communities. I never tell anybody who to vote for, but I do say you should vote for somebody who cares about you, who cares about your community. And that way, we don't get in trouble. That's right. And again, Artistry, Hip Hop Caucus, a number of organizations are out there helping with narrative. Narrative is so incredibly important because it helps to share what's truly going on in a voice and a way that resonates with lots of different people. And I think you need real examples of how change is happening. So I thought I would share a few. How many folks have ever been to South Carolina? Some of y'all from South Carolina. How many folks have ever been to Spartanburg, South Carolina? Oh, yes. So Harold Mitchell, I always bring Harold forward because of the amazing work he's done. Why are government programs important? Because there used to be something that we created called the Environmental Justice Small Grant Program. Harold got one of those grants for about $20,000 and then has leveraged it over $300 million plus of change inside of his community with other community leaders. They faced many of the challenges that many of our communities did around housing, transportation, jobs, healthcare. And they've just been able to do some amazing things, build 144 partners. How many folks know what shotgun housing is? Okay, I saw somebody say, yes, I do. I mean, shotgun housing, if you want to keep it real simple, you open up the front door, can see out the back door, does that make sense? Not a whole lot of insulation going on. Some of us who are from the country, I got this $99 suit on, well, half the suit, I'm from the country. So I understand that dynamic, but we also understand there's not a lot of insulation there, so electricity costs. So folks who are in the community were paying $300 to $400 a month for their electricity costs. We got 500 new green homes built there with all the newest technology at that time, and now folks have home ownership. There was also a program to make sure that people became homeowners. Some of the houses were split level, so some people lived on one side and rented out the other side. So there were all these dynamic things that were going on that I know many of the folks who are in the housing space here were always making sure that they're implementing. And then the other dynamics that were going on as well. They're putting in solar also, so people's electricity costs will be zeroed out. some of it will go back to the grid. So you've got all these opportunities that are in front of us to be transformational, to move from surviving to thriving. And it doesn't stop there. You have examples like Reverend Leo Woodbury. I appreciate Leo's work, and I wanted to bring it into our conversation today because he understood, he'd been through 2 hurricanes, a number of flood events, so they began to actually develop these various sets of tools. So he has a response disaster kits that now they make sure that everybody across their county has. So when challenging times hit, people have the things that they're going to need. There's also someone who works with them around on the medicine side of the equation, because sometimes when a flood hits or a hurricane hits, and if you don't have the medicine that you need, so it's also a part of the training for the kits that's there. He's also got a new center that's there. They've got these hydro solar panels. Anybody know what a hydro solar panel is? I see 2 folks do, so we gotta make sure everybody else got it. So it literally pulls water out of our atmosphere, so you can actually have drinking water as well. So especially when you're in a challenged area. So they've got all these double pluses and triple pluses that are going on. And a lot of folks are paying attention to it, trying to get more resources so that they can broaden it out. You should really give some consideration to having Harold come and share about all the amazing things that are happening in the job creation and housing space, because in the previous set of slides, they also created jobs. They took people through the job training programs. Many of them then built their own businesses. So we've got those dynamics. Let me know if I'm almost out of time.
What is Harold's last name?
It's Harold Mitchell. It's Harold Mitchell, Spartanburg, South Carolina. You've got the Billion Oyster Project. You've also got things going on our Chesapeake, a number of other places where we get a chance to filter the water, get it back to where it needs to be. And then you also have the Sankofa Project. Everybody remembers Hurricane Katrina, right?
Yeah.
So there in Ward 9, everything was devastated. I was there 2 days after the hurricane hit. And as far as you could see, it just looked like somebody had dropped a bomb. And in many instances, people thought they would never be able to revitalize the area. The Sankofa Project has just done some amazing things. You'll see some of the young children here who are being trained to be chefs, but they also grow their own food there. They've been able to rebuild the natural infrastructure there, get more trees into the space, doing all these types of things. So Dennis and others, I would, if you have not yet had a chance to check out the Sankofa Project there, it's just truly amazing the things that they've been able to do. And if we have time, I'll go deeper into that story, but I just want to plant seeds with everybody. The Clean Economy of Color Coalition that was mentioned at the beginning, there's really intentionality in that. Usually, when there is a new economic opportunity, black and brown folks, and others sometimes, hear about it after everything's already moved, right? So I wanted to make sure that we brought together those folks who had the entrepreneurial spirit, those who wanted to make sure that we had greener and cleaner opportunities into the space with people who can be funders to help people be able to get started. So we did that dynamic. We had a number of people who participated, and we hope to be able to get it going again. We just got to put a new direction on it to make sure that we're meeting the sets of resources that still exist. In Detroit, Donnell Wilkins also has been doing amazing work with young people and returning citizens, training them up. She has a 96 or 97% rate of placement, and only 3% of folks ended up going back into into the legal system. So I always want to give a shout out to the programs that are on the ground, actually doing the work, giving people real skills. And once again, many of the folks that went through these programs have also created their own businesses. And that's around energy efficiency, hazmat stuff, a number of other things. And of course, young people have been leading. You've got to have an intergenerational movement. Anyone that's been successful has lots and lots of talented people in all ages. And then we also have the Sacred Grounds program over at NWF. I come from a faith-based background. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to reinvest in those spaces and help to revitalize the areas there and help our environment as well. And all these things help. and addressing the climate crisis. Don't worry about that, that's just us trying to make sure that we get these pieces of legislation. And this is why I do the work. I'm sure many of you do the work for the very same reason. It's for the next sets of generations that are out there. And I'll just leave you with this. And I apologize for going fast, but I wanted to stay on time. My grandmother says, you have power unless you give it away. Many times we give our power away. Sometimes we give our money away to people who are trying to take our power away. But I think that that's incredibly important when we think about addressing the climate crisis and these environmental impacts that continue to happen. So we just need to make sure that we are coming together and that we are, utilizing our power in a positive way. Dr. King said that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. When we think about what's happening in relationship to the climate crisis, what's happening in relationship to racial justice issues, what's happening in relationship to immigration, a number of different types of things. We are one human family, and we should show up that way if we want to make real change actually happen. With that being said, look to the person to your left. Help your neighbor if they don't know their left. And look to the person to your right. Reach your hand out to the person on the left-hand side. See, people just help your neighbor out. It just help them. Reach your right hand out to the person on your right-hand side. It's important. The last part is probably, of all the things I said, the most important thing is us reconnecting with each other. Because when we reconnect with each other and reconnect with our humanity, we stop a lot of the craziness that goes on. We don't allow people to separate us, and we build together. And that is the most important lesson that my family taught me. It is to make sure that you never separate yourself from someone, and you can build as far as your mind can take you. So, with that being said, I'm gonna stop because I think we have maybe a few questions if I didn't go too long.
I was just gonna ask, does anybody have any questions for Mark?
We have one question.
Yep.
Yes, I came in a little late, right, but maybe five just got in. But my name is Mustafa Boluth Umar, and we're having an applied research garden in Ward 7. A lot of stuff that you do, we are doing. We do our own solar. It's one of the only solar gardens in the city. Everything runs off of solar. We do aquaponics, hydroponics, aeroponics, hoop out certification with carpenters, with bricklayers. We deal with returning citizens, the disadvantages, the disabled, all of those people we do in one. We also get ready to start, we just got a couple of dollars to get ready to install the hydroponics and the solarponics as well, right? We have a creek that's right near there where we'll be getting water from, so we'll be seeping it out, reading the EHPs and that level and all that. And as we speak, that's what we do over there now with the return of citizens disadvantage. We'd like for you to come over there to see it because all STEAM, everything in there is a STEAM. The whole project from the ground up. We use wooden pallets, we use any material that we can find. I'm talking about any basically thing we use, we name it. We even familiar with the shotgun houses because in Ward 7, right there in Clay Terrace, at the bottom on 55th, before they tore them down, they were shotgun houses. You look straight through and run straight out the back, right? So I'm familiar with that. I'm from DC, but I'm country too. So, 'cause that was the last part of the frontier over there in Ward 7. On that area, that's still basically like country, right? But I got my information. I like to link up with you all and show you basically what we do. We do it every day. I'm talking about right in the neck of the woods where most people run from in the hood. We're there. Since we've been there, hasn't been a crime or nothing in that basic area over 14 years since we've been there. We want to be able to let people to see that we want to reach out to not just that, to other areas, other wards, and show them basically what we want to do. Our concept, Hustlers to Hobbs, is an organization that's built up on returning citizens. Our motto is transforming land and lives. Our end of our motto, we want to teach these youth how to build, not kill.
Right.
So,
That's right. Yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead.
We are fighting you call it artificial turf. Okay, we have a lot of schools in our city that have redone their athletic fields, and they're laying this artificial turf, which creates the heat island, which is toxic. It can't be recycled or gotten rid of as easy as it put down. So how do we reclaim our athletic fields, because our children are playing on them and they're being exposed to this toxicity? So what do you suggest here, especially in light of the fact that the new football team is coming in, is talking about rehabbing all that area that we're gonna have as a campus? But how do we address getting rid of these toxic athletic fields that we've invested so much money in here in the city?
Well, we've had a lot of research on this, so we know the impacts that a lot of young people are dealing with, especially as temperatures go up. I sit on the Green Sports Foundation board, so I can get you linked up with some of the scientists that are doing the work in this space. I also have some relationships with the team owners. So we have a number of the pro teams. We have some of the college teams that have also made some of those types of changes, so it'll be healthier. So I can link you up with people who have expertise in that space. So that might be the best place to start, along, of course, with working with the government that's here on it. But sometimes if you have these other individuals that are saying that this is important, maybe it'll give you more leverage for the conversations on the local level. Yeah. And then I would also talk about the footprint of these huge sports arenas and facilities and the impacts that that also brings into our communities. But I just tried to,
Pollution.
yeah. But let me link you up with the folks there, and then we can go from there.
Anybody